Hello, Cardstack community. My name is Christy. I'm the founding director of the Cardstack project, coming to you from the land of the Web3. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Phillip Shoemaker, who is Identity.com's executive director, to talk about a hot topic of the moment, which is decentralized identity verification and other aspects about who are you dealing with this amazing new world that we call Web3 and blockchain. Welcome, Phillip.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here and talk about this important topic.
Absolutely. And I think, as a community working on decentralization, I think we're starting to realize that sometimes we want to know who you're dealing with. And we want to do it in a way that we're not relying on one party to say, I'm a government. That person is what they want to be. And there must be a better way. And I know that you've been working in this space. Can you tell us a little bit about what decentralized identity is aiming to do and why is it so important for Web3 and this broader crypto blockchain world to embrace this approach?
Yeah, absolutely. In all my time in the industry, I found that these honeypots of information, right? Honeypots that Facebook and Amazon and everybody carries around with our identity and our identifying information is problematic, right? It's something that there are these honeypots of information, RPII, that hackers are just drawn to, right? Because they want to be able to steal identities because you can ultimately get money and other things out of that. And so for me, decentralized identity is one of the ways that we can control that. No longer do you need to have a honeypot of information. You store your identity on yourself, right? You carry it around with you. You ultimately leverage that when you need to, and you're in complete control of disclosure, right? If you apply for a loan, they may ultimately send you a message saying, okay, this Bank of America needs to have all this information, including your social security number. Now, you are responsible for pressing that button that says, yes, I'm okay with them getting that information.
Right.
So it puts the control in your hands. If you say no, that's great. That information doesn't get shared. You might not get the loan, or you definitely won't get the loan, but, at least you know what information is going to be shared. And that's one of the main things about decentralized identity. Let's get it out of the centralized servers. Let's put it on your own device. And then you're responsible for the disclosing of that information.
Yeah, I think, people who are used to using mobile devices or social network application are used to for that blanket request from the beginning. Do you want to connect with your friends? Give us everything. So what do you think is the kind of change of behavior is necessary for people to be more judicious about when they give to whom, and how does a protocol, maybe the UI in a protocol, help people make those choices for themselves?
Yeah, I find that one of the key things that most companies do is they want to offer you a full KYC up front. If you go to an exchange or something like that, they want to do a full document scan, get all your information immediately. And then you just don't know what happens with that, right? You have to dig into the terms of service or the privacy policy to understand where that information goes. And you'll find that every centralized exchange, as required by US law and other laws in other countries, they store honeypots of information, right? They're storing your PII. So you want to be able to leverage a service that does the opposite, right? That doesn't store this, that ultimately tells you they're not going to store any information. They're few and far between. Not a lot of companies accept decentralized identity at this point because it's nascent, right? It's a new market. And part of the issue is that it puts a little more control in the user's hand, which is good and bad. Right? When the user has more control, corporations don't love that. But on the other hand, when the user has more control, that means that there's problems ultimately with regards to if you lose that information, right? If you lose your phone, how do you ultimately recover it? And so there's a lot of issues like that need to get worked out in order for this to be a much larger industry than it currently is.
Yeah, and I think the idea that people control their wallets and keys in their phone, while is probably familiar with people who have been, playing with Bitcoin or Ether over time, to most of the people I talk to outside of Web3, outside of this little world, the fact that you can't recover your password, or you can't recover your seed phrase, or you can't recover what you believe was yours is a little bit of a difficult thing. Do you think is the identity use case going to drive better tools for recovery and creation and self-custody? Or do you think it's dependent on the DeFi or the NFT people figuring out and then piggyback on that? Do you think identify is a driving use case for self-custody or following up?
Yeah, I think it honestly is a driving use case. Imagine if you could ultimately scan your your a driver's license again the second time, along with a face scan to determine you are who you say you are. And you can forget about passphrases or anything along those lines or passwords. You just scan those two things. They ultimately are able to recover your data from an off-chain data store, like a storage or a Filecoin or something along those lines. But being able to be able to recover your data, there's got to be tools that are created. We need this for wallets, right? We know that. This is one of the largest problems with Web3 in general, is that it's super difficult to use. And these tools, especially the identity space, will help to solve these problems and be able to create easier to use on-ramps for our customers.
And I think, we see a lot of valiant attempt of starting with crypto trading and then working out these things. And there are also decentralized social people that's working on kind of like wallet. But if this identity allows you to get access to either opportunities or physical spaces, these are the use cases that people are talking about in what can decentralized identity do? It just drives a more visceral real world demand. You don't need to be a speculator or understand some magic of Web3 to benefit from being able to have that be your kind of decentralized passport to your world. Do you see certain projects or certain types of use cases built on top of your protocol that's particularly promising in bringing that first use case, right? Social networking is what drove the Facebook ID or Facebook account use case. What do you think is the use case that would drive the identity.com ID or that decentralized way as the adoption driver?
Yeah, right now we have two large Solana projects that are leveraging us. Civic.com, Civic Technologies have been using this protocol for quite some time, and they're doing some amazing stuff with regards to uniqueness. They have a product called Civic.me, and then of course their standard NFT bot detection, other things along those lines. And then we have Encore Fans, which is doing a similar bot detection. For me, the bot detection is an easy on ramp, right? It's a great way to start determining with NFT sales, how do you keep bots out but allow humans to get in? And then the uniqueness pass that Civic ultimately offers allows you for NFT creators to say, look, I only want one to be sold to each individual, right? You could have 28 wallets, but you're still only one person. You're not 28 different people. So Civic restricts it to that. But I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg, right? There is so much more below this that's a possibility. And one of the things that I'm super excited about is the concept of pseudonymity, right? Balaji talks about this quite a lot, especially in his recent book, The Network State. And the idea is that there are so many people that are completely pseudonymous online, and they want to be able to maintain that moving forward, right? They should be able to create projects. They should be able to get jobs under a pseudonym, right? Why do you need to know what somebody looks like or what the real name is in order to accept their work as appropriate or valid for your work scenario? In my case, I would love to ultimately be able to hire people that I never see. I never know their real name. I never know what race, what religion, what gender they are, because that completely eliminates any unconscious bias. And it absolutely eliminates a conscious bias because you never have the ability to check into that. That to me is the kind of world I want to live in, where people are pseudonymous, but you can still, there's a company like Identity that does background checks. They know who they really are, but that data is squirreled away on that person's phone and nobody has access to it. For me, this is kind of the future that I see, because look, if you look at what happened with Bored Ape Yacht Club, how the 4 founders were doxxed by a journalist who only wanted to know who they were. And so many journalists I've spoken to said, yeah, I thought that was a great move by that journalist because we wanted to know who these people were. And I kept asking the question, why? Why did you need to know who that person was? And the answer was always, because I wanted to know, right? There was never a valid reason. It was like talking to a child at times. Like, why do you need to know who these people are? They're just creating NFTs. Exactly, right? It's because. And it was crazy.
Yes. Yeah, the reputation is something that, we think of as like you has to be attached to a name. But, I've seen people, obviously, in Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, right? The
Yeah.
reputation precedes him or her, right? The person's work speaks for him or himself or themselves, right? What do you think is what is the necessary pieces to allow people to build up this reputation over time against a pseudonym? Is it something that the protocol you're building allow for, or is it that this idea, not quite provenance, right? NFT is provenance, but what you've done, the accomplishment you've done over time, how is that presented within this pseudonym identity?
Yeah, a valid question, because obviously if you're a pseudonym, you want to be able to show some sort of reputation, how many years you've been in the industry, if you're a medical doctor or a virology scientist, et cetera, right? So these are important things to be able to take into account. So our protocol, we call it the Gateway Protocol, allows for unlimited numbers of gatekeepers, and these gatekeepers validate certain information. There could be one that just validates all your LinkedIn credentials, right? And then they can display that in a pseudonymous way. So maybe it'll just say you've graduated from this university, that you have these types of degrees, and they leave it very generic. They don't do a time frame or anything like that, because then you get into ageism as well, right? Another thing that you want to watch out for. And you can present it. And imagine if we did HackerRank and GitHub, so people could see the number of commits you've done over time, so people would know what type of and HackerRank to see what kind of JavaScript or Solidity engineer you are. These are kinds of things that we could pull in through the Gatekeeper and present it in a pseudonymous way, so people can't ultimately verify your identity. Because you're absolutely right. Reputation is a key piece. We learned a lot of this during the COVID stuff. Everybody was on Twitter talking about the best type of bleach to eat or to drink in order to cure yourself of COVID. And you're like,
Right.
What do you know about medical science, right? And there were so many people proclaiming to be experts in this space that absolutely weren't, while the ones that were being largely ignored. So for me, I would love to be able to have a tool that ultimately allowed me to be Professor XYZ, but then have a little bit of reputation that follows me, but not enough details in that reputation that people can then triangulate who you are, right? What your real identity is. And that's one of the problems that we need to figure out. So yeah, our technology is set up with these gatekeepers, and anyone can join as a gatekeeper to do this type of work. But look, there's certain requirements that we look for, because we're a trust-based system. So I can't let just anybody be a gatekeeper. We ultimately have to enter into some sort of, it's permissionless, mind you, but we ultimately have to see what kind of SOC2 compliance you're doing, what your document retention scheme is, et cetera, because we want to make sure that our users that are using the platform are protected. Their identity doesn't ever leave. And at the same time, we want to make sure that people are deleting the, like if you talk about a KYC and a full document scan, we don't want any companies to be holding onto those documents, right? They should be deleted immediately after use, et cetera. Yep. So we require a little compliance there. But like I said, it's permissionless, and we're building up a DAO to ultimately help regulate the authorities that join our system.
Yeah, I think the people think of the identity as like your government identity, related loans and stuff like that, and then there's like your Twitter identity, which is how many followers you have. I think you mentioned that people who have a lot of followers, maybe even a blue check, which is another type of label, can be experts in everything, because you have 1 million followers, you must know everything about everything, and that's just simply not true, right?
That's right.
So in different domains, do you see gatekeepers that has certain expertise of validating, let's say, medical type of qualification, versus someone who may be more compliant to say this is person's accredited investor in these kind of local jurisdiction? Do you see specialization in vertical industry or certain techniques and evaluation for these gatekeepers?
Yeah, I absolutely see that. For me, I'm reaching out to all of the big guys in just a variety of disparate fields to be able to onboard them and get them to start representing and validating identities in a variety of ways. Obviously, you go after the big document scanners, the Onfidos, the Socures, the ID.fi, et cetera. And these guys are doing total document scans. But then you have to start looking at those other guys, the GitHubs, the LinkedIn, the HackerRank, and these folks that are that validate not necessarily what we think of as identity, right? If you think about identity, there's kind of three key aspects to it. There's your legal identity, and those are things that don't often get changed, right? Your name, your hair color, well, yeah, right. Those kind of identity, your eye color, et cetera. And then you got your social identity. So that's all about what clubs you've joined, et cetera, including GitHub and those kind of things, what NFTs you own, that's part of your social identity as well. But then you have your personal identity. And your personal identity is how you dress, how you act, how you feel about yourself, et cetera. And some of those are completely malleable, whereas the legal ones are pretty strict, right? It's pretty nailed down. And for me, the holy grail is to get the US government and other governments to issue decentralized digital identities for their citizens. Imagine if the US were to do that. We're in conversations with a few countries on this right now, but the US has a great start with the Digital Identity Act of 2020. They're pushing it through again right now. They need to change that, make it decentralized, because again, all they're pushing is the concept of more corporations creating more honeypots of data. And that's just, it's something we can't handle anymore.
Yeah, the decentralization of U.S. identity is just the fact that the state DMV somehow becomes the default identity issuer at the state level. And you know, if anybody have gone to the DMV and kind of look at this person who's sitting in front of me at this booth is the gatekeeper for everything.
That's right.
and I mean, a lot of people take their job extremely seriously. There's great DMV employees everywhere.
That's right.
But it is a system that I don't think anybody designed that way. I think it just happens to be.
I agree with you. I've been there recently.
Yes. It's interesting that people think about this identity as a problem specifically for maybe the NFT space or the DAO space or the ability to do airdrop. But it's interesting to look at, you know, I was part of an organization that was a member of the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C. And when I was there, they were beginning the work on verifiable credentials. And then that work leads to the decentralized identity. How do you, I mean, that's the web of the Web3, right? That's just the actual 3W, not web with a 3 at the end, right? What is your organization's relationship and your support or embracing or derivative of the W3C standards around decentralized identity and verified credential? What's your view of those industry, which, by the way, the members are like Google and like, you know, Mozilla and stuff like that. How are they seeing this intersection between crypto version of Web3 and the WWW version of identity?
Yeah, to me, the W3C is a super important organization for the future of the internet, right? That's something that I believed in for quite some time. And we've always been big proponents of the decentralized identity of DIDs. And we were disappointed when W3C proposed the DID version 1.0 standard, and companies like Google and Apple and others shot it down, or at least gave it a thumbs down as far as they were concerned for whatever reasons they had, right? And it was then that I started writing a blog post about why I thought this was disappointing, that of course these centralized entities didn't want to get, give up on centralization, et cetera. But it was at that point I realized that identity wasn't a member of the W3C, so I should just keep my mouth shut. And so we joined, right? We ended up joining the W3C. I made sure that we were officially in the DID spec, that we're in the DID working group. Our CTO, Martin Rydell, he is somebody that's been involved in the DIF and the DID spec from day one, right? He's been involved since 2016. So for us, we wanted to get at least officially involved. And so we joined all those organizations, Linux Foundation, the DIF. We made sure we had representation at all of those, because I think the DID is the wave of the future. Having these off-chain credentials, which is what we issue as part of our Gatekeeper. We issue a DID. We just then make them available on-chain, right? I believe in this whole concept of off-chain credentials that you can carry, that you can hold on to. Nothing stays on-chain other than perhaps an attestation that ID is valid, right? Or something along those lines. Yep. And so for me, I've always believed in the DID standard. I still do. And with the DID version 1.0 spec, we recently voted in favor of it. And it looks like it's, with Tim Berners-Lee and others have pushed it forward. So at least it's getting out there now. I'm happy about that. And we want to continue supporting those type of open standards. And our system is just one of those things that takes a DID and makes it available on chain. On Solana right now, other chains are coming. But for us, that's an important part for developers to be able to more easily get identities, ingest identities for their customers.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I'm no longer a member indirectly through my organization of the W3C, but observing that Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, nudged it. I'll use that word. I will not say any more than that. Just nudged it towards an approval, to the delight and dismay of some, welcome to the political process that moves human civilization forward. But it's delightful to see DID now becoming a recommendation of that type of, expectation that is part of the web now. One thing that is interesting is see how many different approaches of actually implementing the DID. You guys are doing it on chain on Solana. There are people who are doing it in a more kind of a side tree aspects of it rolling up on the Bitcoin blockchain. We use DID internally just as an identifier, not being anchored on chain yet, but it can be, right? That's the nice thing about it. It's like the moment you want to anchor it on chain for your use case, we do subscription billing and payment. And that would be good to identify vendors and customers that way. And then to the degree that they have a decentralized identity on chain, then you can cross-reference it and then say, oh, those accounts are much more trusted. Not necessarily a single blue verified checkmark, but certainly many different color check marks that can add to that particular references and do that. So I think the web is always about different technology and implementation interoperable in a certain kind of like good enough way. And I think the idea is just that perfect like URL type of concept, which is there may be a lot of different opinions of how to do it, but we agree that that's a thing we can all use.
Exactly. For me, the building blocks of the DID and the verifiable credentials, super important for Web3, super important for the future of the internet in general. And I imagine a world where potentially people could log in to websites with their DID and you just pick which DID you want to use. Is it really me? Or is it my pseudonym, right? Whichever one you ultimately want to use is the one you should be using. But, it gets so much bigger than Web3 as well. If you think about verifiable credentials being used, having a VC that's on my laptop, a VC that's on my phone, and then my DID knows I communicate mostly with those things that are verified. They can do a handshake. They ultimately make sure that I'm on the right machine. So things like cybersecurity and hacker and malware and other things just starts to drop. Now imagine if you had verifiable credentials in shipping containers throughout the world and just completely integrated into the supply chain. One of the things we could eliminate is slavery in the supply chain, right? Seeing that number that 80% of the products we buy off the shelf has slavery at some point in their creation. Just blows the mind. It's 2022, right? And why do we still have slavery? And so for me, these are the kind of things that we'll ultimately be able to fix with DIDs and VCs. And that's a long-term view. But look, I think the driver of this right now is entirely Web3. So let's get it integrated into Web3 the best we can, and then let's conquer the world.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think it's really interesting to look at, the decentralized identity space has like such a broad spectrum. On one hand, we may want to make, an item an identity and give it its provenance or something like that. On the other hand, there are protocol like Proof of Humanities that basically ask you to get on a video call and hold a thing and say, I am this face and this physical attribute, right? And they are all part of the decentralized identity, the spectrum of who, is it a person, is it a bot? Sometimes you may want to identify reputable bot. That may be a good thing, right?
Right.
Such an exciting design space. Are there things in the kind of adjacent space? For example, people talk about Soulbound token, which is a particular thing that has been kind of promoted from people who are more in the NFT approach because they have started using NFT as a type of proxy identity. What's your view of the relationship of Soulbound tokens and NFT as membership identity as it relates to this more kind of maybe less legal aspect, but certainly closer to the more traditional understanding of identity?
Yeah, we've looked a lot at NFTs and SBTs in general. Soulbound tokens for me was one of those things that sounds amazing at first glance, right? Because of course, an identity is not something you want to put on an NFT that you can ultimately sell, right? Because then there'll be warehouses of people with fake identities, tons of NFTs that represent other people and be able to log in using those. So we know that's just a deal crusher, right? We can't do that. That's what I liked about Vitalik's idea of like Soulbound, right? That he saw before. And for me, that made it a little more appetizing. But the problem is, as soon as we have so much legacy, and sometimes legacy is bad, sometimes it's just hard work people are putting in and it's still good. And that's how I feel about verifiable credentials and DIDs, is that there's so much work that's been done on that to build trust, to build out the whole three-way trust system, et cetera. For me, that was a big thing that I wanted to preserve, and SBTs kind of eliminate that. But having said that, I think SBTs are great for reputational aspects, right? Give me some reputational aspects for that person. Don't put my driver's license and passport information in an SBT. I don't want people to be able to easily look at an SBT and know that I'm a man, or know that the age I'm at, or what race or religion I am. I want to eliminate that from people's vision at all. Not that I have anything to hide. It's just really nobody's business, right? If they're interested in me, it should be for my work product, what I have to say, et cetera. And that's how I feel everyone should be treated, right? Let's treat everybody equally on that. And so for me, SBTs are great for reputational pieces, but not for everything.
Yeah, it's almost like getting a badge that you have some like wilderness badge, and it's that it's not you, it's part of you, and it has to be built on top of something that is an identity that is you. But it's a nice decoration. It's a badge of honor, and it's good to not be able to transfer and sell my wilderness badge to another kid, right? For marshmallows, right?
Yeah, exactly. When I was at Apple, right, I was at Apple for a while, and every year I got another little acrylic block that said Phillip Shoemaker, Apple, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, et cetera, right? When I moved, I checked all those in the recycling bin. I mean, really, I'm not going to carry these acrylic blocks. Those should be SBTs. Right? That should be a Soulbound token. And then I'll be able to carry with me my, any sort of credentials that I earn. If I go to Udemy or any sort of online website that teaches me something and I get a passing grade, give me an SBT. I'd love to have that on my reputation.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So the last topic I want to talk about is the general kind of trend of trying to understand a little bit about who your counterparties are. And there are, I did an interview with Ari from the TRM Labs, head of government there, and they have a great approach using analytics, looking at blockchain history to determine risk factors. And that could be used by centralized exchange and then increasingly used by DApp to make sure they're compliant to the local law. And that's a different approach. It's not looking on this issuance workflow and minting token, but just looking at the data that's available in these amazing public ledgers or ledgers that we have access to, and making judgment call in a more machine learning, data science kind of way. What is your sense of this type of quantitative data science oriented way of determining either reputation or risk? I think on the spectrum there. And how does that fit within this more, I wouldn't say deterministic, but certainly a level of gatekeeping and determinism that comes from the approach of issuance and minting? Do you see them coming together? Do you see them going in conflict?
Yeah, I absolutely. First of all, I love it. Right, I think this is a kind of approach that we need more of in this world, and especially in this industry, in the identity industry. Too many people get fixated on identity as being KYC, full document scan. Now the man is going to know everything about me and have my passport, et cetera, right? That's, and which is kind of the antithesis of early Web3, right? I've been in crypto since 2012. I loved the anonymous nature of it. I thought Satoshi was an absolute genius. That's why I have the Bitcoin white paper behind me.
Yes.
I'm a fanatic about decentralization and privacy. But which is funny, right? Running an identity company. But I do that in order to preserve people's identity. I want there to be more protections around it, et cetera, which is why I'm against honeypot. So anyway, and doing KYC and full document scanning is important for certain segments of the industry, not all of them, but far from most of them, right? I think it's more reputational aspects. And if there are ways, like there's a company, Poseidon, that does something similar as well, that's all about, they look at your history of owning NFTs and they they qualify you as maybe you're a trader, maybe you're a flipper, maybe you're a hodler, and the NFT creator can ultimately decide, well, we don't want any of these flippers. We just want hodlers. We want people that are going to hold on to this forever.
Right.
That's what we want. Somebody, a good community. But there's others that say we don't care. Right. And so I think these kind of metrics that talk about trading and other things are super important for the industry. And those are the kind of people that I want to get into our ecosystem so we can make those variable, those reputational markers and aspects available to somebody to be able to include in their profile and include on their on a specific DID. It doesn't have to be on every DID, right? I imagine you'll have a handful of DIDs, multiple pseudonyms, but when you use our system to vote in a DAO, for example, you'll only have one vote regardless of how many DIDs you have, right? How many pseudonyms. You should only ever have one vote. And those are the kind of things that we want to add. And these type of reputational markers, these things that are doing analytics and metrics based on your past behavior, that's exactly what this industry needs. KYC piece, look, is for regulated industries and maybe a few others. Sometimes you need to do an age gate. If you're going to have a real money casino in the metaverse, you're going to have to age gate people. There's just no way around that, right? It's not, the government is not going to look at that differently. And so we need to ultimately figure that out and allow people to fully document their age, but in a way that's just so less painful than we're doing now.
And then creation of this risk of this honeypot is also something that I think the approach of using these kind of verifiable but not centralized way. For me, I really believe that this metrics or this quantitative approach is very valuable. It is kind of frustrating that a lot of those things requires like more Web2 integration. They're more like APIs and data services. Super interested in seeing what other people are doing about getting those type of outputted that you are top traders or you're not a flipper, and getting that be available to smart contract developers who are able to gate on those parameters, even though the computation is done outside. We're working on some of these kind of Merkleized proofs, taking analytic outcome and then writing back a proof that you can go and say, hey, validate I'm part of this group or not in this group, but in a smart contract, not just in a dApp. And I think that's the full circle of bringing that off-chain computational analytics back on the on-chain and hopefully be part of a single identity that can be pseudonymous or not.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. I think you're absolutely right. Those are the kind of systems that we need to get into place in order to have a good, strong, robust identity for Web3.
Yeah, and the incentives of getting people and inviting people. Who do you want to invite? I want to invite all hodler, right? That can actually be not just a gating mechanism for doing things, but actually an acquisition mechanism. And we've seen some airdrops that's targeting different people who have used different protocols that have done certain things. We know the rabbit hole, for example, is doing these kind of like, quests that people build a reputation. I really hope that all of that signal is part of one ecosystem that is interoperable versus the little pockets where you have to choose, do you want full paper or do you want reputation only, and then not having that. Like as a dApp builder, I would like the infrastructure to work better together and have us focus on the user experience and less on just trying to piece together these different puzzle on-chain or off-chain and sometimes different chains. And it's still very struggle, but I think as an individual using this, it is me or my pseudonym or my avatar, and it should just be as easy as something that I can do on an Instagram app.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You're a smart man. This is exactly what we're trying to build with identity, and I'd love to pick your brain more on that.
Absolutely. Love to have more conversation about this, because we're all trying to just make this land of the Web3, call it land, because it's encompassed many sub cultures and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, I'm a big fan of Tim Berners-Lee. It is still the web. It's not something else. It's another layer that we're putting on that. As a parting thought, is there anything in the identity.com roadmap and what you're launching in the future that you want to kind of like emphasize to look out for? Because it seems like a lot of things are going on both within the organization and in your partnership network. Yeah,
we're growing as quickly as we can. We're putting our head down and just building through this down market, but we're releasing a new website in the next few weeks. We have a new version of our protocol coming out within the next 2 weeks, and we're doing a big push on the conference circuit to be able to talk to more people about what we're doing. Well, look, it's all about building a community, and that's something that we are striving to build towards the rest of this year, is get more people onto our Discord. I want to get more developers on board thinking about how we can take some of these, some, like you were saying, quantitative metrics to be able to build out more robust identities. And so we're always looking for people to help join us and help spread the word. So for me, in the next few weeks, you'll be seeing a lot of changes at identity.com, and it should make everything a lot easier and simpler and more understandable.
I think it's also great that you're just in the right time. I think people, developers who have gone through this kind of, it's just wallets, it's starting to pay attention to, hey, it's not just wallets, right? Let's build on that. And there's a permission. Sometimes product market fit is about the product reaching the market, and sometimes it's the market maturing to reach a product that already been thinks. And given the history of identity and its relationship with Civic and other ecosystem and the W3C, and it's so amazing for you to, it's like, hey, with thought leadership comes actual leadership, and thank you for contributing to W3C. It's not the easiest organization to work through because it's so diverse and there's such power dynamics with the big company, the browser maker, and the people who want to work within the web. I congratulate you for the success of getting certain things past the finish line, but I also understand that the journey has barely started.
Thank you. Really appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Phillip, for your insight today. And I hope we were able to touch on most of the topic around this idea of decentralized identity. There is many overlapping things and people working on different things. At Cardstack, our goal is to create a cohesive experience around all of these things. But the breakthrough has to happen with people who stick with the problem for extended amount of time to actually go with the breakthrough. We are in an industry that has this weird thing where things are really short time frame, 6 to 12 months bull run cycle, and then 6 to 12 years trying to see if we can actually make the web a better place. And I think both of those cadences has to happen together. And thank you for your commitment and your tenure. Show your commitment. That's your reputation precedes you, I guess.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate your time. And look, we're in this for the long haul. We want to make a change. You know, Steve Jobs said you want to make a dent in the universe. That's what we're aiming for.
Absolutely. And, and for the community that follows us, this is so fantastic to have you join us this week. We do this every Wednesday, premiering on YouTube at 9 a.m. Eastern, where we talk to builders like Phillip. And until next time, take care. Thank you so much, Phillip.
Thank you.